creators have stopped listening to the screaming. They have for everybody. People think that these pop feminists have a lot of schlep. They don't. The media companies cannot stand them.
And here, even just speaking as a small creator, and this is something I've talked about, and now that I know people have started finishing volume 1 of Calidus, they'll know what I mean. There is a one shot in there that goes into an Asian coded district. And I was so stressed out about that.
Yeah, I know you were really freaked out.
What if I mess this up? And it's like, you can't care. You get to a point where if you care, you're going to freeze and you're never going to get anything done. You have to just say, okay, I'm just going to do my best. Chips fall where they may.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've taken to going, this is an experiment. We don't know how it's going to go. I've been rounding up sensitivity readers for a friend's anthology, and the feedback has been really diverse regarding reactions. And it is specifically focused on trans women in this case. And, the purpose of sensitivity reads is, to me, not this good, this bad. It's let's be able to predict how people are going to respond. And if we don't want that response, well, we do have to change it. If we're prepared to accept that response because we feel like the point is mission critical, well, we know how to perhaps present it in a different way. In one case, it was simply a question of changing the order of the stories in the anthology, so that the first thing the player encountered wasn't a violent story. And, that's easily enough done. You need people who can actually have conversations and be able to have a response that's more than it triggered my anxiety. That can be a million things. So, it involves everybody putting on the grown-up pants to an extent. And unfortunately, that's exactly the behavior that the pop culture feminism has actively discouraged. And I admit I don't know how to get out of that. Because it's easy for me to say I just grow up. But you've got a generation where
their parents were not involved enough to teach them how to be adults.
And not just parents, right? Educators. Yeah. And this is my big problem with let parents raise children. Okay, there are a lot of parents that won't. There are a lot of bad parents. And you're saying that educators can't fill the gaps left by the bad parents because they're the only hope. If you have bad parents, that's it, you're screwed.
And I mean, I think part of that is, you've talked about the way the war propaganda from World War II and everything after that has caused the breakdown of what we see now. And so it's like the reason we have kids nowadays who their parents weren't great was because their parents weren't great, or their parents were absent. And then you had the abusive parents before that who were all stressed out and had their own PTSD from the war, whether they fought or whether it's because dad came home and now we can't talk about anything. It's like
I think also, we say let kids be kids, leave kids alone. Well, we need a society that lets parents be parents, not just mothers, parents. And that is something that during the period where the millennials were coming of age was not happening. The 80-hour work week was seen as proof you loved your job, blah, 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 blah. And, that matters. People just were so, and it's continuing, people are so struggling to just pay their bills.
And that's the thing. You can say, oh, parents need to raise their kids, but I'm aware, even when I say that that's part of the problem, our society is not set up to allow that.
That's right. Exactly. And this is a society-wide problem, because when did a lot of these problems with stiff upper lip, don't show your emotions start? Well, industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant, what was one of the things we got during those? Child labor. Mm-hmm. And that was because living got a lot more expensive. People moved into cities. You had to pay rent if you didn't own property. And it had a knock-on effect. And that became, well, just suck it up, die for your job. Because that's where that came from too, the whole Protestant work ethic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just, it's real easy to just blame some abstract like patriarchy, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. We have to look at all these things, because decolonization or destroying patriarchy, smashing patriarchy, does not mean you just have to yell at the nearest man, because working class dudes are affected by patriarchy in negative ways too.
It's almost like that's going to make them mad and hurt them and drive them into the arms of extremists.
Right. But it's also, even the ones that don't go extreme, people aren't talking to each other now. People are getting blamed for the systems.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to stop blaming each other for things that are bigger than us. We have to start listening to each other. And one of the things, I was very fortunate, because of where I grew up and went to school, I'm going to drop the diversity word, but it was very diverse. It wasn't just, I knew Black people. There were Black people from Africa, and Black people from America, and Black people from the Caribbean islands, and so on and so forth. And you saw, there's no one thing that all Black people want.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the point where I grew up that you make distinctions from what island or country someone comes from, and you realize that the background of someone from Sudan is not the same as someone from Kenya, is not the same as someone from Nigeria, and that's just one continent. And that's the stuff we actually have to start, like we did with Twilight, like we did with some of the other stuff, going, all right, we think this is shit, but other people like it. Let's treat that as halfway valid and listen to them for a bit. And that means everybody. I probably never would have played the Yakuza games based on the description of what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
They are some of the greatest deconstructions of masculinity out there, and you don't see writing about that, because
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants there to be a good deconstruction of masculinity out there that has a platform. It's real easy to say this is really bad. You take a lot of shit when you dare to say something's good. And that was why I got horribly, like, I the whole Gamergate thing with me, and the article I wrote for Polygon, that
Mm-hmm.
was in response to a staff writer saying games were terrible at depictions of mental health, and oh, all these villains are mentally ill. And I'm like, hold on, and I wrote about God of War and Kratos's trauma, and the depictions of how the deconstruction of masculinity there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote about Gears of War and the fact that, yeah, these are tough dudes, but they bother to ask each other if they're okay in emotional moments. They're telling each other to walk off gunshots. But when it comes to the feeling moments, they let their buddies take a minute. They're there for them. And I said, this is really positive. and I am much more for going for championing things I like than criticizing things I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to criticize some things because otherwise people are like, oh, you're just a shill, you like everything. But I so much more enjoy talking about why Tears of the Kingdom is amazing, or Yakuza's great, or God of War is my spirit animal. Joke, joke, joke. Sorry, Indigenous people. Um, but you know, inner voice, inner voice. I'd much rather talk about that, or why I think that, say, you know, the treatment of a character like Aphrodite in the God of War franchise is really nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
than going, oh, she's sexualized, she shouldn't be there. No, that bores me, and it should bore everybody. We should be beyond that. There's going to be things in media that threaten you and make you feel inferior. Happens to me all the time. It's really important that before you start screaming, you sit with why, like you said, why it makes you feel inferior, why it makes you feel unwanted. But we haven't
Mm-hmm.
trained that. We've trained the exact opposite.
Oh yeah.
And we've, by proxy, not just trained, you know, baby feminists to behave that way and just scream and scream and scream. We've, by proxy, trained everybody to just scream and scream and scream instead of actually and sitting with why it bothers us and healing accordingly. And that's really where we need to get to. It's the reason I moved into more mental health work, because as I drilled down, I realized that's what's at the core of all of it. Because, you know, a show shouldn't bother you if you're more settled in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can go, this is ridiculous. You can roll your eyes, but that's not the same as feeling cut to the bone.
Yeah. I was like, we know my response to She-Hulk. I enjoyed the first few episodes. I didn't like the way they handled the finale, but I'm like, okay. Liana enjoys it. Good for her.
Well, and you
Move
know,
on with my life.
I had issues with them going into revenge porn and then bailing out.
Well, I mean, for me, it's the fourth wall break totally broke it for me.
I mean, the thing is, that is inherent to She-Hulk.
Oh,
The,
absolutely.
the fourth wall break is her. And so, and again, there are some people that just don't get the idea of Moon Knight. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you don't like the central premise, you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
I,
like the fourth wall break is totally valid. It's just not for me because
right.
my brain is going, but how does the story work with that?
Well,
So
it ultimately ends up feeling meaningless because it was a self-aware retcon.
yeah, and that's why I didn't like it because I'm like, I don't care. I just okay. Happy ending. Yay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, moving on.
that was my issue with the Flash movie as well. That they decided to go with, and I won't spoil anything because it actually is sort of, it's it's a great moment that actually spoils the whole at
Mm-mm.
the ending. And they go for sort of a joke Easter egg reference as the ending. And it ultimately makes, it's a funny moment. It was cool at the time, but it makes the entire journey Barry Allen goes on in that story completely and totally meaningless. We can take nothing from it. It says nothing. It's just visual spectacle.
I was kind of worried that people were gonna watch that movie and come out going, it's actually great, and everything was gonna be forgotten. I feel a little satisfied that it's not great.
Well, DC and Warner have got to be real worried about Aquaman.
They should be.
Yeah, they got to be real worried because, to me, the Flash bombed so hard. There's no point in even talking about the movie. People stayed away because of Ezra Miller.
Yeah, it's
They just refused to accept their bad behavior.
good.
and they didn't want to see a person. And I really think because of the, the redemption of Robert Downey Jr., if there had been consequences people felt were fair, they'd be willing to forgive. People
Yeah.
um understand mental health crises. People, if they're willing to have some consequences for their bad behavior, people want to give people another chance. But I think they thought Ezra Miller got off so light that they don't want
They
to
should
reward it.
they should not have been on the red carpet. I get
Uh,
that they're the star, but putting them on the red carpet, I saw that and I'm like,
See, it would have
congratulations on
been,
screwing yourself.
well, if you're gonna have them there, they have to take questions.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, it needs to be what, um oh, blanking on his name, can see his face. Oh, he was that heartthrob British guy. See, I've got Hugh Laurie, Hugh Jackman in my head, and it's neither of
Hugh
those.
Grant.
Hugh Grant, thank you. There we go. You can tell where my brain's oriented. But he, when he got caught cheating on Elizabeth Hurley with a prostitute, he had to apologize again and again and again. And he had to go on the late night show and have jokes made at his expense and have people go, why? The idea that you're, and nobody terribly cared about the poignance of the fact that, yeah, he was dating one of the most attractive women on the planet. So maybe cheating's not about that, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's about something else, but it was just, he just had to take a drubbing. And finally people were like, all right, you've run the gauntlet long enough. That's what Ezra Miller had to do. And they really needed to not show up in a high bun and Daenerys braids.
Yeah.
It just seem didn't seem humble. They should have shown up in the equivalent of penitence robes. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
none of this cutesy counterculture shit right now, Ezra Miller. That's, you don't get to do that right now, because,
You're not affiliated with us.
well, not only did they're being a terrible example of a non-binary person at a time where that really matters. Like, talk about every stereotype about non-binary people in the book. People like Ezra Miller are why I gender conform as much as I do, because I don't want to be seen as constantly acting out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just got to put on the damn dress. And fine, you make it your own. I refuse to follow modern trends. I always go vintage. It works for me.
Yep.
But if they, I really think if they had just been full on, I really fucked up, it would have matched the theme of the movie. But they just tried to hide them away, and they got a real, is Amber Heard going to be there? How
Probably.
all people are going to be watching for is if she shows up to the premiere and how much screen time she has in the film. And there is no winning. They're trying to have it both ways, and they can't. And the fact that Disney is re-releasing Pirates of the Caribbean as part of their 100th anniversary celebration,
That says something.
that says what audience tolerance and taste is. And, there's an example of whatever people think about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Attacking third parties over it is really stupid. And I'm watching the Johnny Depp side not mention her name, because don't give her attention. He won.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving on. They're taking the high road. And okay, they're still doing Amber Turd jokes, but I I can't blame him. It's funny. It's, like I said, it's okay to be ratchet sometimes. But they are trying to move on. They're trying to get on with things. And a year later, the Heard stands are still relitigating that trial. It's tactically, I believe they believe she's an abused woman. The tactics, you know,
And this is part of why I don't like the believe all women that came out of Me Too, because sometimes women lie.
I
It's
don't like,
almost like we're human.
well, I also don't like this idea that a case involving major celebrities is indicative of anything with normal people, because it's different.
Yeah.
And the I try to be so careful because I do, like I said, I believe Anthony Rapp. And part of the reason I believe Anthony Rapp against Kevin Spacey is because he said something and all these other people came out of the woodwork and said, me too. And in this case, they were men. But when somebody finally spoke in public about Joss Whedon, you got all these people coming out saying, me too. That is what you expect when a person in Hollywood is that flagrantly abusive. People don't just do it once. You would have expected every single one of Johnny Depp's exes to come forward and say, yeah, he hit me. The opposite happened. I believe those women. If we're supposed to believe women, Kate Moss and Winona Ryder, and I mean, Winona Ryder's got a career again. She had something to lose.
Yeah.
I believe those women. And the problem with the whole Amber Heard angle is you want to believe the 8 women who said he didn't do anything abusive, or the one that made up claims where complete strangers who manage a trailer park showed up to say, no, that's not what I saw. This makes no sense. And at this point, they're not believing women. They're saying, don't believe your eyes and ears, believe me.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of that with some people who do buy into that believe all women. It is
Well, it's
it's just
supposed to
this
be an
mindless belief.
it's supposed to be an anti-gaslighting thing,
Mhm.
not active gaslighting, right? You're,
Yeah.
you're you're not supposed to be going believe woman. And the thing is, she was believed at
Mhm.
first. She was given absolute benefit of the doubt. If you read the judge trial in the UK, which she was not the defendant there, she was a witness. And based on the facts of that case, I agree with the judge's decision. I do not agree with the reasoning, because the judge's decision was, he's an addict, he doesn't remember, he was just blacked out, he doesn't remember doing it.
Mhm.
And a guy who's been an addict as long as Johnny Depp has been probably doesn't black out anymore. He'd have a lot of other things in his past if he was a blackout drunk
Mhm.
or a blackout drug user. He's a functional addict, which is bad for him. But you know, the judge had some bias about addicts, and that's stigma, and that's, a whole other thing we have to open up to deal with this shit. But when they were able to call rebuttal witnesses against her story, it fell apart. And you know, believe women is a starting point. I truly
Yeah.
believe that. I believe that most people, period, who talk about being abused are telling the truth. They may have some things wrong, they may be assuming some things, they may not have been perfect either, but they they truly believe they were mistreated. And that's because admitting someone took advantage of you is a shameful thing.
Mhm.
That's why people don't tend to lie about it. And so I really truly believe that it's believe people who say they've been abused. But then you get into this media thing, right? And these are trained performers. These are not a regular person. And that complicates the whole thing. I mean, what's his fucking name with that video? Was it Crowder?
I don't know.
Was
Which
that
one?
him?
Oh, yeah.
The guy who the video was released on of him just being, I mean, he's guilty of being a massive dickhole.
Yeah. Crowder.
Yeah, but the the whole thing about, well, she's lying. Well, there's video right there, guys. It's video. Have
And
some
like,
damn common sense. Stop just jumping to your team.
and like, here's the thing. There's a couple channels I still follow who were anti-SJW but have mellowed out since back then.
Oh, interesting.
And they're still like, mostly they've moved on to other content that
Okay.
isn't political. That's the only reason I'm still following.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came out, they're like, yeah, no, I never liked him. I hated his guts.
Yeah, well, he's a disagreeable person, and there's an example of a guy who, you notice how many of these guys have obvious red flags that people dismiss?
Well, yeah,
And,
because it made them feel good when they liked the points they were saying.
well, it's also, men are supposed to be fired up and angry and care about things and stand up for themselves. And we go back to the thing I said, when people are perceived as women do it, we're unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
We're having a tirade after one tweet. And the funny thing is the tweet in question was of the form, I did not have this on my bingo card today. That's a joke.
It's a meme.
It's a meme. That's hardly somebody who's terribly worked up about it.
No.
But
you don't think of in jokes and memes when you're emotionally distraught.
That's right. That's right. You're just all over the place. But I know that if I get into that, I'm going to have everything I said, everything I did picked apart.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to get every benefit of the doubt. I'm going to get the exact opposite. And I really understand why people get done and people just don't want to deal with it anymore. And I think that the people that rightly are saying, but I didn't do that to you. Yes, absolutely true. Try to understand that I am going to be much more selective in who I engage with, but also you can't expect a person under those circumstances to smile and say thank you.
No.
And
that
too often I do think that is more expected of women. And part of the reason I don't do it is, one, it's not in my character. That's just not me. It would seem so completely phony because it would be phony. Mm-hmm. But also, I think that somebody has to take the knocks so the scales get balanced better. It's one thing to complain about it. It's another thing to do something about it to improve things. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think there's still actual, and that's why I give She-Hulk credit, even though I thought they sucked out at the ending. I do think that was a bailout. Mm-hmm. But they just didn't know how to end it. They didn't know what to say about that. So it's like, look, this is something that happens to women. Tee-hee, total retcon, fourth wall break. Not the choice I would have made. I still think overall the show did something because it was the first to attempt to do that biting comedy that guys like Seth MacFarlane and guys like Ricky Gervais and guys like Ricky Gervais was on The Office. Yeah, I mean the Rick and Morty people who, one of them turned out to be a shitty person with weird sexual deviancies. Is anybody
I'm shocked?
surprised?
Shocked.
Yeah, look at that show, right?
Yeah.
They're allowed to do it. they're allowed to take big swings and offend people and upset people and make people angry and still get another chance. That's what I think She-Hulk did that was important, that they allowed a similar type of show to just be completely aggressive with a female protagonist from a female point of view. And as much as it was uncomfortable for everybody, I think in times, because at times I'm like, oh, Jen, just stop, girl, stop, which is what I was supposed to think. They did break down the barrier that way. And, you know, even of course, the first things, of course, it's going to be a flawed attempt, right? They're figuring it out. It was a huge leap forward. Of course, there's going to be some rough edges, and I think you can give it that and still say it wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
The same way I see some of the important things the Last of Us HBO show did with that Bill and Frank episode.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wish we didn't need an apocalyptic story where everybody dies to tell a really romantic gay love story. You know, legitimately romantic, legitimate feels right there.
Yeah.
Of course, they have to die at the end. Of course, because every gay love story, one or both of them have to die. Thank you, Brokeback fucking Mountain. You know, but I mean, did I think the show was overall great? Not as a complete unit. Do I think there were some great things about it? Yeah. And we're allowed to have those nuanced opinions. But the minute a show becomes a litmus test for whether you are a good or bad part of a movement, you can't do that. And I think that's anti-art. That's anti-expression. And that's not going to open things up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not going to get more diverse stories. It's not going to get risk. It's not going to get people telling unique truths, because then you get something like the Woman King that was just blacklisted, and it has all the things that intersectionalists claim to want, but because it wasn't sufficiently slavery bad, they blacklisted it. And it's a
like
good movie.
We've seen similar things with Crazy Rich Asians, where it's like
that did well, though.
True.
I mean, okay, it might not have it did well at the box office. It didn't get a ton of awards.
I've seen it get a lot of critique. It's not an awards movie.
No, it's not.
It's a fun summer flick.
It was like a movie that showed that Asian dollars are worth something.
Yes.
That there's a significant enough viewership that will vote with their wallets.
Yeah.
That's what that movie did. The movie itself was another one, very well acted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was very rooted in some stereotypes, but some of those stereotypes, that was some stereotypes are true sometimes movie.
That is a movie that sits next to Legally Blonde on my shelf. It is that kind of movie for me.
Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And okay, great. That's not going to be everyone's thing. It doesn't have to be.
No. And the whole point of diversity and getting beyond the token character is, as you tell more stories about more kinds of people, then suddenly you don't need one Black character to stand in proxy. You can have different characters who represent different aspects of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably a good place to land the plane. Yeah. I mean,
I think so.
there's nothing more to say there. It just make more stories, period. and I mean, we live, and that's going to require web comics and video games and podcasts and indie books and comics because Hollywood's not going to do it. They're obsessed with existing IPs. They're branding everything in existing IPs. So if we want this stuff and it's important we get this stuff, independent creators have to do it. They're the only ones that can. So just make stuff. And I don't even care if, I mean, we've said this again and again, I don't even care if it's good. Just make it. Just put it out there, because you know what? You can always make another thing.
I mean, I care if it's good.
I care if it's good just because I want to see good things get made. But everybody's got to start.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, and your first thing shouldn't be your best. My God, if the first thing I'd done when I was 19 years old when I started working in media was my greatest achievement, holy fuck, shoot me. Like
True.
that you don't want that, you know, but it people think it has to be perfect to put it out, and it doesn't. There are people that are gonna not connect to it despite the flaws, connect to it because of the flaws. People like Bella because she's stupid.
Yeah, well, it's like, for me, like I said, I love bad book reviews. That was part of what motivated me to finally start writing and posting Calidus Chronicles, was because I'm like, I'm a better writer than some of these idiots.
Well, that's what Alan Moore said. If you want motivation, read bad books, because they got published.
Yeah, well, don't get me started on Alan Moore right now.
Yeah. Why? What? Okay, what happened with him? We'll play the music out. Well, you explain what the heck. Well, let's wrap, and then you can tell me what happened with Alan Moore, because I saw him trending.
Yeah,
but
I don't know if it's something recently. I saw a quote from him about Robert E. Howard earlier, and
okay, yeah, that's old.
Yeah,
okay.
But I just found it, so I'm officially like, I don't care what you have to say. Go
okay off. So, well, we know Song loves Robert E. Howard. You guys love Two Women Talking. Thank you for your support. Thanks for supporting long form formats. That's always a nice thing in this era of TikTok. Not that there's anything wrong with TikTok, just some things need more time.
Yes.
You can buy Calidus Chronicles Volume 1 at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, link in the description box below. What else do we have to say?
Follow on social media, and both of us have Ko-fis.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, coffee, however it's pronounced. All right, everybody, thanks for watching, listening, whatever you do on YouTube.
Bye-bye.